Welcome to this installment of Brave New World on ContextTV. Critics would argue that Justin Trudeau was born to give away taxpayer money, but compared to the nut job in the White House, we're not going to complain. In fact, overall, Prime Minister Trudeau and the Government of Canada deserve good marks for how they've handled things. Early on, they introduced a number of initiatives to help individuals and businesses stay afloat to keep the economy on its tracks to avoid a Great Depression-like state. Individuals who were affected by COVID were given money to be able to spend, pay rent, and basically stay actively involved in the economy. Meanwhile, companies were given a 75% wage subsidy to encourage them to keep as many employees on payroll to avoid the risk of individuals being let go, becoming dislocated from the media. In a nutshell, if your revenues in March of 2020 fell by 15% or in April by 30% compared to either the average of January and February of 2020 or March and April respectively of 2019, the wage subsidies would be eligible to you, whereby an employer would only have to pay 25% and the government picked up 75%. In theory, it made a lot of sense. In practice, it's not surprising that Justin Trudeau said that the government was a bit underwhelmed with how little claims came in. They had earmarked $75 billion, but only $3 billion were filed. Why? Let's take a look at two different examples. Let's say you are a small business, a restaurant, and your revenues probably fell by anywhere from 50 to 100%. For you to keep everybody on staff means you're still paying that 25% of their labor costs, which basically just increase your expenses, ergo increase your losses. It makes no sense. And if you've gone to pick up food from your favorite local restaurant, you've probably seen the owner with maybe one or two maximum staff basically try to keep the operation afloat. So the wage subsidy plan doesn't really help them. Now let's go to the other end of the spectrum and you're Air Canada. Air Canada used the wage subsidy program to keep people until they figured out the full effect of the spillover. And instead of renewing the wage subsidy a second time when the government announced that they were extending the program, they decided not to, letting go 20,000 people once they realized that they were running at 5% capacity. Now, I think one reason they did that is because they may be asking themselves if they want to proceed with the Air Transat merger, but that's another point. Ultimately, the finances just didn't make sense. It was easier for them to let go of employees to minimize their expenses. Now, early on, I would not have dared to articulate this because perspective. WatchMojo was fortunate to transition to work from home. We were operational. Overall, we've been fine, and we were anticipating a super duper 2020. And, in all likelihood, we'll still have a pretty good year. So we definitely didn't want to seem like we were lacking any perspective. However, hearing the government say that they were a bit underwhelmed with the response, I thought a more effective solution, if the budget is already earmarked, would be to identify sectors of the economy and companies that were going to benefit either way throughout the 2020s. And in fact, in some ways, COVID will only accelerate the trends that underlie why those companies would benefit. Say you're in AI, say you're in automation, online education, drone delivery, things of that nature. And basically say that, look, we recognize if you are a small and medium-sized business, you may now be hesitating to continue hiring as aggressively because you're not quite sure what the spillover of COVID will be. So we're willing to give you a 3, 6, 9, 6 sounds about right, a 6-month wage subsidy. Can't be 100% because that will be, ripe for abuse and fraud, but whereby we will give you 75% of the wages and you commit to 25% in the hope that companies that are strong, the horses that would have won in the 2020s anyway and will probably win nonetheless despite COVID, basically attract a larger pool of employees who were affected by COVID. The reality is we have to stop this talk that eventually everything goes back to normal. That will simply not happen. Restaurants could not break even sometimes at 100% capacity. They're not going to break even at 50% or 25% capacity. That's the way to accelerate the recovery and make sure that the natural cycle of business and industry continues and the government makes sure that the recovery happens sooner. What do you think?